Hello. Hello.
Hey, Brandon.
I think Toddy wanted to talk about his write-up, didn't he?
Yeah, he did one more write-up with GHCR as well.
Thought I was going to be late to this meeting and somehow I was still the first one here. Yay, Toddy's here. Okay.
Hey,
This could have been
folks,
a lot
sorry
worse
for
if you
being
weren't here.
late.
No worries. We're just happy you joined.
Okay, I actually don't have a topic. I just shared the GHCR stuff with in the chat yesterday. That was kind of the second one. What I mostly see is kind of course, catalog is completely different implementation, I would say, between GHCR and Docker Hub. But the thing that made kind of impression on me was GHCR is not very explicit with the authentication challenges. One of the things that I'm kind of struggling right now is when I think about, okay, if I, let's say, hit an endpoint and get back some information, how should I implement, let's say, the token acquisition? And while Docker Hub was kind of more clear, although I think somebody mentioned last time that they never thought that somebody will parse the authentication header. That has been always my expectation, that the authentication header will tell me exactly what to do. And Docker Hub was better, catalog on the side, but GHCR just tells you like go to user/repo. It's like that means that I need to know exactly the user and the repo that I'm contacting. Does that make sense, Brandon and Ram, Sajay, Nathan?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the right. So your authentication header is actually scopus repository user/something.
User/repo, yeah. And it doesn't matter which repo you hit, it always returns that one.
So it's just a hint, basically.
Yeah, it's just a hint. It's not the exact repo part. I'm trying to find my.
That was for the catalog API. That wasn't for the individual repos, though, right?
No, also for the individual repos. So GHCR just always returns in the authentication repo slash. The scope is always repo slash user/repo. That's what they return to you. Not only for the catalog.
Yeah, when you did the catalog, you didn't have a repo, so the catalog was just. I'm going back to look for it again. Yeah, the scope was just repository colon. Oh, it did have the Python. How to get the Python?
I put the Python when I authenticated. So let me just find. Can I share my screen?
Sure.
Okay. So doesn't matter what I hit, whether it's the V2 endpoint or whether it's the catalog or whether it's my TODSM Python repo, I always get the scope as this, which is, let me make it bigger, which is a repository. So the scope is repository user/image pool. The scope is always the same. And then you need to figure out exactly. So first, it's not very clear how to, for example, if I want to use just the V2 endpoint, what the scope will be. If I want to get the catalog, also it's not clear, and the catalog actually behaves a little bit differently. But let's say if I, for example, try to hit my repository, which is TODSM/Python, and get a pool token, I cannot use the scope that is returned in the response because the scope doesn't tell me anything.
But can you? Because my read of this is that you need to explicitly pass that same scope back to there when you're requesting the token. No,
then you get the error, an existing repository. So if you use that scope and pass it to GHCR.io token, then you get error. I don't think I documented that, but you get error.
Interesting. Now I'm wondering what it is that I'm curious what happens under the covers with RegCal, because I was running the catalog after you told me it worked the other day, and it works for me, and I'd take whatever they give me for the scope.
When I made the manual requests, so I will go and actually, let me demo that to you. So. Should have cleaned up a little bit, but let's say, so you're saying that if you actually, yeah, let's do the following. Give me just 1 second. I'm gonna get my files. You can chat about the weather if you want.
been so long since I've done some of the stuff manually. It'll take me a few to do it myself.
Okay. So here is the request. So if you make a request to GHCR.io token service GHCR.io, and the scope is repository user/image pool, you get forbidden. Because there is no such user, there is no user and image. If I change this to my correct repository, then I'll get the token back. Does that make sense?
It makes sense
So
what you're saying. I'm just trying to figure out how my code might be functioning because I don't add in any special repositories when I do it. So I want to do some more testing on under the cover, see what's really happening when it's working for me, but it's not for you.
Maybe you're ignoring the scope that you're getting back. Because the way that I like knowing this, the way I will implement it, I'll completely ignore the scope, even for any registry, and I know what I am trying to get access to. So
I don't ignore the scope, but I do merge the scopes. That's what I need to look at to see if I merge it with something that would work.
Okay. The other thing that a little bit bothers me is that like for this one, it's okay. I will not be able to, but it doesn't give me back the authentication header again when it says forbidden, which is actually different error message. So if I write the code and if I get forbidden, most probably I'll assume that actually I don't have access to that and not that my scope is wrong.
So Tari, first of all, is catalog even implemented in GHCR? Catalog is not implemented, right?
It's
The
one of the few
catalog
registries where it is.
Huh?
It is implemented, but I am not talking about the catalog in general. Catalog is implemented. It's implemented strangely that actually you cannot access the catalog with anonymous token. You need to authenticate with the real username and password in order to access the catalog.
Okay, so you can get a token with the username, an actual username and password.
Yeah, and you can get the catalog then. And it's a huge catalog.
Okay, cool. Oh, so they've enabled like the full catalog API basically.
Yep, it's a full host of everything.
Wow.
Everything. One thing that actually I had and I didn't investigate is whether I get everything that is publicly accessible plus my private repositories in the catalog, or is it everything that's publicly accessible?
Oh, that's a big
You remember,
Yeah.
you remember, Sajay, we were talking how you can create a dynamic catalog depending on what access you have.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, that's the API I'm scared of, but
yeah, that will be a scary one. Yeah.
Okay, so you need to get the actual scope on the repository before you do any, but that is, okay, you find that confusing, or I thought that is the expectation.
I find it confusing that I cannot infer the scope from the authentication header that I get back from GHCR.
I see. Docker's kind of like documented that this is how you send the scope. It's odd that they're putting a dummy scope there. Maybe it's
they are putting the dummy scope user/image.
Even when you send it to your specific repository, right? That's what you're saying.
Even when I send it to my specific repository, yeah, I can show you that. So if I send, let's say, get manifest for to this actually, no, I am wrong. So when I send it to my specific repository, I get the right one.
Okay, so
I stand
the
corrected on that.
so the auth error is not cached. That's pretty much what I was trying to find out.
Yeah.
Okay. And you have no hint as to how long that refresh token will be valid? Because we don't know whether it's actually a JWT or not, right?
There is supposed to be a timestamp returned in the bearer token response.
Is it a standard JWT bearer token or is it some other kind of like custom?
It's a separate field from the token.
Oh, okay.
So the whole token comes back and there's another field in there alongside,
I see.
which is expires in, issued at, and stuff like that.
Is that standard with the other, with the Docker Hub response as well?
Yep.
So it's not a JWT or it's its own.
So the bearer token response says, here's my token, the access token, when expire, issue, refresh token scope, a bunch of other things like that. And then the access token itself could be a JWT.
Right. The reason I'm asking that is clients should be looking at the expires field to determine and not the contents of the token, right? That's what we would write the spec as.
I would treat the contents of the token as opaque, yes.
Okay. So that means everybody should be returning that expires to also. So the clients can code
Yep.
against that. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Looks like Toddy had connectivity issues.
I'm working through to see if I can generate this myself right now. So,
Toddy just pinged me on Teams saying that Zoom crashed. So
oh no.
hi Toddy, welcome back.
Hey folks, sorry, something happened with Zoom. Where were we? Oh, I was saying that Brandon is right. So when you request a specific repository, you get the scope correctly back in the reply.
So you can technically do, I think this is probably where Ram Kumar was also kind of heading, right? Like we can avoid like a root level V2 access for authentication and challenge at any point can be requested.
So, to answer your question, Sajay, I just got a token back trying to query the API here. It only responds back with a token. It doesn't respond back with the issue and expiration time. I think there's a minimum the clients are supposed to assume, but they don't include in their response.
So now we cannot decide how long we can use the token unless we get a failure and then we retry, right?
There, like I say, there is a default that you're supposed to assume. So if you get it back and you don't have any of those timeouts in there, you're supposed to process, and I'm looking for my code for that. There's
That's
a
so
minimum.
vague. You probably have custom implementation per provider, right?
It's supposed to be just, I mean, I think everybody has had a default. The default that I implemented myself was 60 seconds. So I assume the token must live for at least 1 minute.
That would be enough for one, like you expect one pull or a couple of pulls happening within that minute. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, and if you exceed that, then
Because
you
that
would
has to exchange for a
go
bunch of
back and
access.
refresh and get another token. Yeah.
So you need to get a bunch of access tokens based on that, right? Like every SaaS URL or like one repository, couple of images.
You would periodically be refreshing the token. Yeah.
So a lot of authentication.
Now, if the response came back and said, hey, this explicitly expires in this time frame, then you wouldn't have to do that.
Right.
Mhm.
But now, Toddy, I will say that I did not get a forbidden when I tried to use the user image :pull scope. But I did have some other fields, so I'm going to see if one of my other fields is what changed it for me.
You did not get forbidden. That's
I
interesting.
did not get forbidden. And I'm just using curl. Yeah, I just did 3 different requests, got 3 different tokens.
How did you send the request?
A curl to GHCR token, with the scope as repository : user pass, yada yada. And then base 64, my user : and my GitHub access token.
Well, I'm not sending any username and password.
Oh, you're doing
So,
anonymous. Okay.
yeah, I do
Anonymous,
it
maybe not.
anonymous. Yeah. I can try with username and password and see whether I can get something for
Yeah,
user and image scope.
It gave
That's
me a
interesting.
token for that scope when I passed my username and my password and my personal access token that I use. So are you saying that if you put in a special repository in there and do an anonymous token, that you're able to use that to curl everything,
Yes.
to catalog
Mhm.
everything? Interesting.
Yeah. Not to catalog, but I can pull images from public
Okay.
repositories. Mhm.
So they got catalog locked down to needing a user.
Catalog, yeah, you need to be authenticated with a real user.
But it also means that the scope is invalid, right? It's more
The-
like a placeholder.
The scope
Yeah,
was valid, but you have to give it a user. The scope was not valid for anonymous login.
Let
How
me
do you
try with
spec this?
username.
What's that, Sashi?
How do you spec this?
Oh,
Yeah, how
good
do you spec
question.
this?
No, I I should just probably say no to Ram Kumar. We are not yeah, okay, maybe. We
Yeah,
should
you're
not,
right.
we should not be pen testing this, but but I think the lack of documentation is the challenge here, right?
It's interesting, Brandon. Yes, when I put actually authentication, proper authentication, I get token back, even for scope user / image, which is the placeholder. But if I use like anonymous, then I don't get anything. I get the forbidden one.
Which is very curious. It makes you wonder if they should have put a different placeholder there of just generic GitHub repo of some kind.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess they also have a challenge because we haven't documented this anywhere. So it's like, what do we do, right? Like this is the best call.
Yeah, that's how they decided to do it. Yeah, that's true. Okay, what's next then?
So I mean, I'm kind of concerned about one fact, which is you're not getting the expiration hints. Because we assume that it to be opaque. Without the expiration hints, you end up having to cook in defaults that are probably inconsistent across registry operators. Like I know that for ACR, we have this assumption that our Uber provider is like AD or Azure AD. So we have to honor those expirations on the actual token and can't give tokens that are too long and things like that. So it's tricky for clients to kind of identify when they need to go and refresh it. Also, you don't want to make so many authentication calls if you have a token that is valid. Need to do some optimizations. So it would be good to kind of like at least standardize on, hey, send the expiration back in this field so that clients can use that to determine when. Otherwise, they can send an authentication request per pull. And that would be pretty bad for anybody operating with that assumption.
So looking at the one from Docker Hub, they do say issued at and expires in, which is the extra fields there.
Yeah.
It's nice to
They do
include.
that.
And the expires in for Docker Hub is 5 minutes. So
Yeah, that's
you're still periodically doing it, but
at
5
least you
times
get
longer than
hints,
60
right?
seconds.
Yeah. And the point is you can write a client if it's actually pulling a bunch of images or copying stuff. It doesn't have to do an authentication fail and then figure out it was like, oh, I'm going to hit the 1 minute time window with some skew. I can then immediately refresh it more proactively, better behavior clients, right? So
I mean, the risk we have is that someone gives you a token that lasts for less than 60 seconds. Client is trying to use it after the expiration, but
yeah,
I really hope we don't run across that in the wild.
yeah, 5 minutes is probably okay for a bunch of pulls, a couple of images, right?
I mean, the overhead of running another auth request over a 5 minute period isn't really that big in comparison.
So if we don't have a concern about the challenge can come back from any endpoint, but token always comes from that specific root endpoint, right? It's like it looks like everybody's implementing /token at the root. Wait,
Well, but not on the registry.
it's ZHCR /token, right?
That's for GHCR. Docker is out at registry.io, which is different from the registry endpoint.
Yeah,
which is registry 1.
They did do a
index.
/token, but registries don't have to do /token. They could put that endpoint anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for GHCR, sorry, for Docker Hub, the only it looks like all we can do is honor the realm URL and challenge header.
Yes.
Yeah.
How much of this, sorry, my lack of knowledge here, how much of this is different from standard HTTP semantics here?
So HTTP, when I looked at the specs for OIDC or OAuth 2, I forget which one, they don't have that realm connotation in there. Realm to them is just an arbitrary string because what they're expecting is that you wrote the client web page and you know where to send that auth request to because you're the author of the web page. So because we're trying to communicate to clients that are talking to arbitrary servers, we overloaded Realm with an extra field. So that's where we differed from upstream.
We've had this challenge of can the realm actually be hijacked? right? Like you're trusting a realm that is probably not the same thing or a different one, and what's the implications of that when you have to go to some other target because you're sending your credentials across, right? In the next call.
Yeah. Potentially you would send your credentials to another site. You would do that because the hopefully HTTPS encrypted connection told you to go somewhere else. So someone would have had to hijack
Right.
that HTTPS connection.
Right.
If it's not HTTPS, I don't know. Clear text, you're in trouble at that point, no matter what.
Okay. So the fact is we trust the upstream to tell you where to go send the credentials to some extent.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have anything else for today.
I think to your question, Sajay, I think it would be good to start going through some of those upstreams, HTTP RFCs, and start to note down everywhere that we differ from them, everything that we either do differently or we extend on top of, and try to gather that list together so that we can say, use this and do this, like implementation detail on top of the spec.
Yeah, I'm no IDC expert, so it's going to be just leading at this point in time, just following along.
And RFCs are so much fun to read.
Yes.
I mean, to the earlier question of what's next, in addition to reading specs, RFC specs, no less, my focus right now is entirely on the 1.1 releases. And so image spec, we're there, distribution spec. Honestly, I think if 2 people give us an abstain, we're done. Not done and failed, done is then we can release. We just need 2 more people for quorum. So it doesn't even matter what they vote. So I think we've got an approved spec. We just need a couple of maintainers to step up and give us quorum. And then, yeah, tabulate all these findings somewhere. I think that's going to be our GitHub repo, Rom. We've got the working group repo for in GitHub under OCI.
All right.
Yeah, I will actually go over a couple more registries and then I'll summarize in an issue. So we have a summary there or a doc.
All right. If you got to run, Sajay, we're probably going to wrap up here in just a second.
Yep. I may not be able to join next Tuesday, folks,
Okay.
just letting you know. But yeah, I'll continue with, I want to have at least ACR, ECR, CR to test how they behave. And then I'll summarize everything.
Yeah. If you want to make commits, because I think all of our implementations were focused on client side. So if you want to do implementations for registry server side, that's awesome. Feel free to submit those commits over the GitHub repo, and I'll be happy to give you some reviews on those. Get that merged.
Okay. Yep, we'll do. Okay, folks, anything else?
Nothing else from me. Rob, Nathan, anything from either of you?
Nothing for me.
Oh, this is very good work, Tony. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, guys. Then
Awesome.
I'll see you maybe in 2 weeks.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Bye, all.